thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. My name is Omar Colom. I'll be your host for the AVE podcast. So Austin will be here for us tonight, guys. I'm so sorry. The Master of Words is in a different time zone, and got the times mixed up. But irrelevant. We have an awesome panel with us tonight. Laura Thompson, the voice from Office Hours, will be with us tonight, and so Yvette Lopez, the woman behind the operation manager behind Disability Matters, who also has some great insight into tonight's topic for disability etiquette. I have some questions I want to ask. They have answers. And they also have questions to ask you guys in the community. As always, you guys are welcome to join me live at any point. I will drop the link there for you guys to jump in at any time. So don't be shy about that. And for anybody new to the show tonight, just remember this is a live show. Your questions, your Q&A is accepted, broadcast live, and we will talk about it live with you to the community. We will have Laura and Yvette answer questions if we can. If we can't, we'll let you know we can't, and we'll figure out a way to get back to you with that on the post side and get you an answer regardless. But I'm really excited to introduce Laura Thompson here because she is a longtime listener, longtime follower of our program. She's also the perfect person to introduce us today. So without me talking too much, Lucy, thank you for being here. I see you're tuning from Palm Springs. Thank you so much. And I also see Kent Daniels. Always a pleasure to see you, brother. Looking forward to talking again. But without further ado, sorry, I'm talking too much as always. Let me introduce Laura Thompson.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Omar.
No, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. So we were having some discussions in the background, and I feel like I cut you guys off, and I'm really sorry because there was smiles going on and everything. But before we get going, do you want to introduce yourself real quick, Laura? Give a little bit about yourself and why you are the voice on Office Hours behind everything.
I've jokingly been called the conscience of accessibility for Alex Lindsay's Office Hours. And I have to give Alex a major shout out. I am not really I'm not an audiovisual person. I actually jumped into Office Hours because I was having Zoom issues at the very, very beginning of the pandemic. And Alex kind of picked me up and started figuring it out together. And then as Office Hours became a global conversation where no one was left out, I said at one point, but what about accessibility? And it just kind of became a whole thing. So I have to give Alex a shout out. They have a major focus on accessibility and inclusion over there. But yeah, I am legally blind. My vision's actually 20/800. I've beat the odds though. I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science, a master's degree in academic advising from Kansas State University. And I currently work as an academic specialist for Lamar University Athletics. But in my life, accessibility with the vision is such a big part of what I do. And we were talking on the podcast last week, Omar, a little bit about what the AV world needs to know as, speakers with disabilities, attendees in both the virtual and the physical space. And it's just really about an etiquette or a conscientiousness about how do we approach it. And let's not make it something scary.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I like the way you introduced it. And actually, you segmented great into the next person I want to bring onto the stage with us, which is Yvette Lopez from Disability Matters. And I think what's really interesting about Yvette is she also has that not perception, that's the wrong word, but she also has the insight and the foresight as the operations manager of this, who also does a summit and is involved in a lot of the legality of these things as far as disability, the ADA goes, right? And we can go into that a little bit if anybody has any questions, but Yvette and me have worked in the past. There's a show they do every year, which gathers people together to really talk about these things and really get companies up to code and standard, which I'll let Yvette say more about that because I don't want to speak out of turn. But she's also in that scenario where she has to deal with the AV guys. And the AV guy she brings on board, there is a learning curve on some of these things because you don't want to be that guy who's just like, oh, what's this dude's deal? Well, the dude's deal is that he's deaf and you're being rude. So pick up your game, right? So without further ado, sorry, Yvette Lopez, I want to welcome you to the stream.
Hey, thank you for having me. Nice to be here. Thanks so much.
Of course. So Yvette, real quick, before we dive down the rabbit hole here, let's have it do a quick introduction of who you are, what Disability Matters is about, and your kind of role with that. And obviously I said some things already, so you can jump off of that or you can expand on those things.
So I'm going to preface by saying that I came from corporate America, and I am not a disability subject matter expert. So I come to you with some practicality of coming into this arena. Um, Once I was semi-retired from corporate, I had the opportunity to come work for a one-stop shop disability-related company, and that's Springboard Consulting. And we're going on 17 years now, being in business. We are global, so we are worldwide. I have been with the company for 12 years now. Um, Again, it was something that I've had since a childhood. We're just talking about it backstage. I was introduced to children with special needs very early on, somewhere between the age of 5 and 10 for myself. And that was my connection to disability. I enjoyed interacting and engaging with the children when I was young myself. That carried through high school, that carried through corporate. And then when I was retiring, I said, I'm tired of making big business money. I said, I need to take my skills and try to help an underserved community. And I happened to connect with Springboard, and it's been 12 years. So I also want to help you understand that although I do um, coordinate Disability Matters, which is an event that Springboard has not only in North America every year, but we also have it globally. We have it in Europe, and we do have it in the Asia Pacific area. So it pretty much runs the gamut. So I have some exposure to all those areas. And again, want to just kind of help you understand that if you're not comfortable engaging with persons with disabilities, it can become very easy. And as Laura just finished saying, not scary, because I did it. So if I can do it, I think everybody can do it. So Omar, back to you.
No, I love it. I love it. That was perfect. That was perfect. So I just so the audience knows, once again, I've sent out a link if you guys want to join us live on here. I've always asked some questions to you guys for leading. But while we're on the topic here, so one of the things that I want to talk about real quick is and Laura, I'll throw this to you. You have a disability, which is your sight, right? And one of the things we talked about here, which I want to bring up here, is like the difference between, hey, something's over there versus, hey, something is three chairs down and to the left at the end, right? I'll let you kind of expand on that a little bit.
Well, let me start. I'm going to kind of back up a little bit. It starts with an awareness. And I ask all the professionals, anybody that you're interacting with on a daily basis, just to be aware. If somebody, if you aren't sure, if you think you're going to make an assumption about somebody, ask the question first. Don't just necessarily point, how can I best help you find it?
Right.
And because I'm very famous for saying, I have some sight, I don't see well, but if you can give me specifics, measurement specifics and direction, I should be good. Some people would want you to actually guide them, and there is a prescribed way for guiding, which most people that use it on a regular basis can very quickly explain to somebody who's never done it in about 2 sentences how to provide their elbow and do what we call a proper sighted guide. So, but yes, there is a huge difference between saying it's over there and pointing, and also in the 3 rows to your 3 rows down and 2 chairs in. Those kinds of information things don't take that long. But also, I've said it before, I said it backstage, I would rather somebody ask if they were curious than make an assumption.
No, and what I like about that too is that, just the way you word it, right? That verbiage you use with not only yourself but with clients is, it's not hard to do that, right? But I also feel that if you implement these things now, make this a habit of speaking to people, you just look better as a technician on general, right? Like if a client comes to me or a person comes to me and says, hey, I'm looking for expertise, and you're like, yeah, it's over there somewhere, versus, yeah, actually, you know what? If you go down the hallway here, at the end of the hallway, make a left. That just, it's more personable, more professional to do those things. So making that a habit now versus just because of this one scenario is something really good to do. And to touch on what Laura was saying, it's like, I feel like this was scripted. To say what Laura was saying, Yvette just taught me about this. So Yvette, can you kind of dive into that? What is the proper way to guide somebody? Because to me, I would do what Laura said, right? And again, me being kind of a lazy thinker sometimes, I would say I would just do what she said and then stay behind my desk, right? Like, okay, they got it.
Right.
Versus what we talked about earlier today, which was that guiding process. And I'd love you to kind of explain that a little bit.
For us particularly, right? And you've been with me, Omar, doing Disability Matters. That's an event. So you're talking about, kind of scooching between tables, etc. And let me just sidetrack a second. There are ADA compliances in conferences. The tables have to be apart 6 feet. That's aisles and rows, and where I want to say aisles are, those are, actually even more expanded, because you have to think about leaving space not only for the table and the chairs, but when people kick back, right? People don't just sit at a table, they kind of kick back in their chairs, so that it takes up extra space, hence that. So if someone with a mobility device needs to get through, there should be sufficient space at that point. Back to Omar's question, many of our attendees have disabilities, and in the cases where they need to be guided, I actually pull out my elbow and they grab onto it from underneath, as if though, I want to say, as the way the military usually handles their partners when they're walking. That's kind of the stance, if you're trying to visualize what it is. And then it's very much descriptive, as Laura was saying. It's not, we're going over there and you drag this person. It's explaining to them, we're gonna step about 5 steps. We're going to then turn left, and we're gonna take another, 10 steps, depending on what your geographic positioning is within the room, and all the way to the point you keep describing and letting them know ahead of time, so that you're not, again, kind of dragging them when you get to that turn point, so they have an idea of what's happening just a few steps before. And you keep doing that until you get to your end point, ensuring that they're always comfortable and that you're moving slowly, and allowing them, obviously, to pace themselves, and you actually more or less pacing yourself to them. That's kind of the description in a nutshell.
I love it. I love it. And I'll add to that, right? So for the technicians out there who are watching tonight, something to think about here, right? Is what Yvette just said here very much correlates to if you're, let's say, in an A2 position, right? And this what just came to mind. So if you guys have a better one, let me know in the comments. But if you're in the A2 position, right, and you're dealing with a female, you want to be descriptive as possible when you're miking that female up, right? Hey, is it okay if you remove your blouse for this cord? I'm going to put this upside down. Give me a second. Let me know if it's too heavy on the back here. I'm going to put the cord around here. If you're putting the cord down a dress or something, hey, this is going to go down a dress. Do you mind pulling it down for me? The same thing we would do as in that position to make sure that we're being respectful to the presenters is the same thing you would do for this scenario, right? If you're walking somebody. So these are these correlations I want you guys to see if you're a technician, and how you can do these things moving forward. Laura, I saw you shaking your head a little bit earlier when Yvette was talking. Did you have something you wanted to add as well?
I wanted to just kind of, that is a very basic of sighted guide. There are videos out there on the internet. I believe I gave you last week, Omar, my disability resource list. I think, and I would have to go check, but I believe there are sighted guide instructions in that list. If there aren't, I can add them after.
Yep. Okay.
So if we can maybe put that, I think that's up on the AV Educate Facebook page.
Yes, it will be after this talk. I'll have it up there. Yes.
Okay. I know I had sent you the link last week, so
100%. Yep.
We're really going to give people some instruction.
Well, so listen to Lawrence, and I sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Lawrence. That's a bad habit of mine. But to your point, that was I want to say 8 or 18-page document. It's not very long to read. It's illustrated, so you could say it's a kid's book, right? But it is.
No. I'm sorry, Omar. I was talking about the Google Doc that I sent you last week with all the links in it.
Oh yes, sorry, I didn't share that. Okay,
I think that's already up on the AV Educate Facebook.
That is up.
Page.
Yes,
that's the one inside of that Google Doc. The one I sent you was from the United Spinal Association. That was one link inside of that page and a half of links.
Yep.
And so Laura, let me just be fair and advocate to those of us who are, I was going to say, quote unquote, basic. That's actually, I think, why Omar brought me on, because it's more from a practicality standpoint. Because, like you just said, it's a very long document that can be very scary for some people. So, it's one of those things that I'm hoping that the less, I want to say, the dummified version of it, right? Which I'm trying to express, will help people understand and become more comfortable engaging.
Yes. I appreciate that, Yvette.
No,
We're
I just,
talking about, we're
I just
talking about two different.
I didn't
We're
want to
talking about
scare
two
anybody
different.
who's out
No,
there.
we're talking about two different documents. The 18-page document that he's talking about is from the United Spinal Association. It's
Right.
actually on disability etiquette.
Which is
It's not.
beautiful. That's good.
It's not the site. It wasn't a specific cited guide, but inside of another document I had provided him, there was a link to a cited guide. I believe it was a video.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Right. That'll definitely visually
Yeah, that
run
was just.
everybody.
No, I like it. So I kind of want to move forward here a little. So there was a question I brought up to the community in the event page, right? And one of the first ones I brought is do you make assumptions about what they can or cannot do, right? And I'll leave this open to one of you guys if anyone wants to take it. What would be your answer to someone who maybe is doing that right now, and maybe there's a better way to process or not process to interact with somebody, right? Like, so do you make assumptions about what they can or cannot do based off of appearance? And I know this is a very broad question because there's so many different things it could be, but if you had a scenario you could think of, what would be kind of your answer of like, what is some things that you could be doing as a tech that maybe they could be proactive instead of reactive? And I'll leave that to either one.
Laura,
Go ahead,
me?
Yvette.
You want, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say my habitual practice is let's just use a scenario. If you see someone having difficulty opening a door, I don't assume. That's the first thing. I don't assume anything. Persons with disabilities have every capability that we have. They just do things differently. So let's say someone's having difficulty opening a door, or you might think they're having difficulty opening a door. Just ask if they need any help. They'll let you know. It's just a question. Do you need help? They may say yes, no, I got it. And that's kind of where it is. So don't ever assume that someone cannot do something. There might just be a different approach, like I said, a different way of doing it. And if not, they'll let you know. If they need help, they will let you know.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Laura.
One other thing I want to add to that is if you are staff for an event venue, whether you're an AV staff, whatever, it may be helpful to your first name and your position, just so that they know that you're staff. And if they need somebody, I know I've done that. I've been at conferences and there's been a staff member that's helped me with one thing and it's been super helpful. And number one, I will shout them out to their organization quite often.
Right.
And number two, if I need more help and they've been helpful and it's something that I think is inside of their job description, I'll go back. I'll ask for them.
Right. And Omar, just back to our event for Disability Matters, we always have housekeeping at the beginning of every event. And I should say that each day of the event, because our event actually goes for 2 days. And our staff are pretty much, I want to say marked, right? We're identifiable. So they definitely point us out so that we actually stand up so that everyone can see us. And they're sure to know that who they can go to definitely, get some help, et cetera, on anything they need.
I like that. And I don't have a good correlation except for, common courtesy, everybody. If you see somebody, you ask, right? You're just a good person in general. And I think that goes a long way. I do want to add, and you guys tell me if this is maybe me kind of going far-fetching here, but I do want to add just a caution, like, hey, if you offer assistance and you get snapback for it, be conscious that you're probably not the first. And if you're doing it in a manner that's maybe like, hey, this guy and this person, like my whole trip from my room to this door has been you guys asking me, you need to be conscious of that as well and just say, listen, I got it, no problem. Go about your day. Don't make a scene about it. Don't make a deal, because you might be the 10th person who asked the same question because you were trying to be proactive, but you were just the last guy at the line. Like, really, listen, I got here, right? I didn't need any help to get here. I'm already here. Just let me through, right? You might be that person at that time. Don't take it personal.
Absolutely.
That stuff happens. You've been in that situation, so just be cautious of that. And that comes from me having family in a situation where I've seen that, where my aunt has gotten frustrated because she's like, I can still walk. I'm just a little slower. Stop asking, and it's more funny when she does it, but she's like, stop asking me for help, stop offering to help me. I could do this myself. I'm like, all right, do your own thing, girl. But so I want to I want to keep going here. So Ed had said a comment here. Ed Wallach, by the way. So I worked with people with disabilities for about 15 years, and often people would assume what a person could or couldn't do. I would let the individual do what they could and step in when they asked for assistance. And I like the way he words this, right? I would let the individual do what they could and step in when they asked for assistance. And I want to take this off. And Laura, I'll throw this to you. We had talked about wheelchairs, right? And that verbiage shift, right? Versus wheelchairs are and I'm going to mess this up, but wheelchairs are immobilizing, but they're not. Oh man, see, I already messed it up. So wheelchairs are liberating, right? If you're a person
Liberating, yes.
liberating. If you're wheelchair bound, it's to that person that's a liberating way of movement. It's not a mobility issue. This is giving them movement now that they didn't have before. And the way it's worded in that document was very specific, which I liked a lot. And if you could touch on that a little bit.
We talk about person first language. They are a person first. They're human, just like you are, just like I am. And then they have a disability, a person who is blind or visually impaired versus the blind person. Our disabilities do not define everything we are. Yes, it makes it different sometimes. There are things that we have to do, things we have to adjust to, but that doesn't dictate our personality, 100% our personalities, our motivations. And I just really want you to think about the fact that that's still a human being. We still have thoughts, emotions, feelings. So, but that should make us less, and when you think about it that way, also, I think it makes the disability less scary. You're not gonna break, we're not gonna break. I used to joke as a teenager that people had snow globe syndrome around me, because I was in the choir, I was in the band. I actually competitively danced through high school.
That's cool.
And there were people that were terrified if I would get up on the stage by myself, I was going to fall off the front of that stage. No, I had walked the stage. I knew where those boundaries were. I knew approximately how many steps it was from the back of the stage to the front of the stage.
Right.
Because I had other ways of calibrating versus seeing the edge of the stage.
Yeah, and I think as a person who who can see clearly, or walk normally, or hear normally, those are things we don't even think about, right? Like, how do I, how could they do this? Like, well, because they've adjusted, because they're people and they have a mind and they can think. They've adjusted to the scenarios to do just the way you would do it. They just need to take another extra step. So, and I love the way you said that too. Like, you calibrated for it, right? That's such a neat way to say it, because it's true, right? You have something that's part of your life, and you're making it work. You're not just sitting here like, oh no, I have this problem, let the world figure it out. No, you're being proactive in your life, and that's what they're all doing. No one's just sitting here doing nothing about it, right? So Ed came here real quick, and I want to backtrack here for a second. I thought this was really good. Ed Walker said, that approach sometimes comes off as letting the individual struggle to people who haven't worked with people with disabilities. And I totally agree with that. But it's more about enabling them to do all that they can. And I like the way Ed's very good at his words. But I just thought I wanted to bring it real quick in the chat here. So
Ed, we miss you tonight.
We do. Ed, you're always welcome to come on, man. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to post the link, and you're welcome to jump on with us. But before we get there, we talked about, I want to educate the community as much as we can tonight, right? Yes. We talked about people first language. Can we dive into that a little bit? And Laura, I'd love you to go first, and then Yvette, you guys both said this individually to me, and it's only the first time I've heard of this terminology. So I'd like to dive into it a little bit more of what it means when we talk about people first, and how would we describe disabilities as with people first in mind?
Yes, that was kind of what I just had said.
Right.
The disability doesn't define the person. It's a piece of who they are. And it's an attribute, but it's like every other attribute. We all have an eye color, a hair color, a body shape. Right. A disability is just one more attribute on that chain, or that list. And it's a recognition, but at the same point in time, don't let it be the only defining thing you see about a person. That memory, that cognition that they are people first.
And And Laura, is it a good practice? I'm asking you this question as as the expert here. Is it good practice to also ask the person how they want to be identified? Because I understand that there are some nuances there between people as how they'd like to be identified, whether it's person first, identity first. Um, can you kind of explain a little bit about that too for the group?
Absolutely. If you feel, if you ever feel uncomfortable about anything, admit it. We know that people have questions. Those of us who have disabilities and have done much of anything in the social communities know that people have questions. I would rather you ask me 5 questions than make one assumption about what you think it's like.
I like that.
And
And go ahead.
go ahead, Omar. Sorry.
So I like that, and it comes back to something I thought about a scenario with my daughter one time where there was a person who came into a hotel we were at, and she immediately recognized that they had something, there was something different about them, and she went up to them and asked them, and I was like, oh my God, Alice, you can't do that. And the person responded in such a way that I was shocked but enjoyed it, because it was such like a learning moment for her, where he was like, oh, I'm glad you asked this question. Here's what happened to me. Here's and he was a little bit overweight, but it was because of some of the medication. He ended up, the story ended up being that he had got diabetes, but never got diagnosed for it properly because of his own doing. And when his foot got infected, it's when he found out he had it, but it was too late, so he lost his leg. So now he had to use the wheelchair and the canes to move around, and that's how everything happened. But it could have been the opposite, where he's like, oh, who are you to come up to me? But he like embraced it, because she was a child, she was young, she was curious. She's like, hey, what happened? Like, why are you missing a leg? Like, it's so strange, And he just kind of like reacted in such a way that I was like, damn, that's such a positive way to just react to a kid who's legit curious about what it is and has no ill intentions or no misdemeanor about anything. They're just curiosity. And I think as we get older, sometimes we lose that a little bit, and we lose our sense of joy, of curiosity, because we get so kind of beat up by society saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's like, but when you're a kid, man, that those, sky's the limit, right? You could ask all kinds of questions. And I feel like with this topic tonight, I want some of you guys to remember to be that kid a little bit, to be that kind of just open die and like, hey, I want to learn more, like what happened? This is something I should learn from and better myself from. And, I want to be involved, but don't be, over the edge about it. And like, you got a job to do still, and they got a job to do probably while they're there, So
Yeah.
anyways, I just want to encourage that kind of childlike mentality of be curious, be joyful, just, and learn to enjoy the experiences of like, we all have these differences, how do we come together and really just make it all work and stuff.
Sure.
So that story just reminded me of something like that, which I thought was really cool.
And that kind of brings me into one other point I want to bring up. And I'm going to go very lightly into this point, and we can go deeper if the community decides they want to. But I have a guide dog. Service dog users, if you are a representative of, because there's a lot of issues in the community right now with denial of access, and there are all kinds of standards around that. But just remember, there are 2 questions that you can ask a service dog owner. 1, if it is a service dog, and 2, what tasks is that dog trained to do? Those are the only 2 questions you can ask under the ADA by law. If you are a representative of the conference, the establishment, and it's done so that protects the service dog owner's privacy a little bit. It does not force them to disclose what their disability is. And it's also called credible verbal assurance, which means that if they can tell you what tasks, and they don't have to be super specific, it's a medical alert, you don't have to know what the medical condition is. And those 2 questions can also only be asked if it's not obvious what the dog does. If you see a guiding harness, it should be pretty obvious that the dog is guiding. Not always, but because the balance harnesses look similar but not quite. But if it's obvious that the person's leaning on the dog for brace or whatever, but that's the extent of what the law will allow you to ask.
I didn't know any of that. That's good to know. My experience with service dogs is more of like, and it sounds messed up, right? But like the pretty girl who's got anxiety who just gets a dog to like carry in a purse all day. It's like, why do you have this thing?
That is what they call an emotional support animal.
Okay.
And they do not have legal standing. They do not have what we call public access under the law.
Right.
Oh, so there's different levels to this. Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
That's why the task question is the question that basically delineates the service animal from the emotional support animal.
Got you. So
emotional support animals do not have to have any training.
Right.
This
And
is
Laura,
why we're having all the issues.
You can correct me on this one. I also want to throw out there that when a service dog is at a conference, they're a service dog. They're working. So
Yes.
literally when their little vests say, "Don't touch me" or "Feed me," you really shouldn't. They're pretty much working and helping their owners. So they shouldn't be petted or, distracted, etc.
And
So
I'm gonna jump in here one real quick again. I had a situation. I was in a mall. I had a mall cop. I was walking. I was moving at a decent pace with my dog. The mall cop is literally running next to me, trying to ask me questions about my service dog. And I said to him, I said, "Sir, let's stop, move to the side, and I will be glad to talk to you." And he's like, no, keep going. I'm like, do you realize that by trying to talk to me, I'm missing other auditory clues in my environment, and things like that. You're basically putting me in danger by trying to keep up with me and keep me moving while you're trying to talk to me,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's also about distracting the dog, not even just touching the dog. It's about distracting the dog. Depending upon the dogs I've worked 2 different service dogs now. I had one that I could take his vest off, and if I wasn't actually actively moving, people could pet him. No distraction issues. Vest went back on. He was back on. My current dog, I can't do that with. It's an issue, and it's just it's the different. But we know our dogs. And we know the situation we're in and whether it's safe or not. So if we tell you we're sorry, no, you can't pet the dog, don't think it's
not personal.
It's not personal. It's we know our dogs. We know what's best for them. We know what's best for us.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I bet you had something you wanted to add.
If you're out there doing conferences also, hotels, I want to say many hotels, right? Some are good. And some do, I want to say, the basic that is needed to comply with ADA. There's a step that you have to go beyond the compliance, which is then, like you were saying, Romar, it's common courtesy. Be conscious of what a person is going through. So if your invitation has asked persons if they need reasonable accommodations, and they happen to need a place for their service dog to do their business, not every hotel has a spot for a dog to be able to go relieve themselves. Mm-hmm. Many times when that has happened, in my experience, they've actually created a dog patch, literally a grassy mm-hmm. patch. They've brought in some type of artificial turf per se, but have created a comfortable area for the dog to be able to visit, safe and comfortable. Yes. For the owner and for the person. This actually happened. The most recent was out in Louisville. I mean, it's a major city, right? So there was nowhere in the particular area of the hotel for them to actually relieve the dog themselves at safe at night, right? So mm-hmm. This was built actually right next to the hotel in a spot, and it was blocked off for them so that obviously they were in a safe area and visible to everyone. So
yes.
That's
I appreciate that. Yes, that's and it's sometimes very difficult to, and we as particularly service dog owners and people with disabilities almost have to be lawyers to some degree, at least versed in the ADA law, because you face challenges everywhere you
Right.
go sometimes.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you, particularly if you're traveling as a service dog owner, there are times I felt so bad about this. I actually snapped at a hotel desk clerk, and here it was her first day, because she wanted to see my service dog's certification. Yes, I have a card in my wallet that was given to me saying that the dog and I graduated from a particular school, but that is not a certification. And I don't have to show that. And I'm sensitive about showing that, because I don't want them to think that, I don't want to see them do it to everybody. And then also there are those internet things you can get that say, yes, it's a service dog when it's really not, yada, yada. And I don't want to spend too much time on that tonight, but it has gotten to be very challenging.
So I want to backtrack here real quick and ask, and I'll leave this to anyone wants to take it. Can we define what the ADA is exactly, and how? And it seems like the ADA has a broad scope of things that it covers. What exactly is that in the industry, and how can someone who's watching tonight look more into what the ADA is? And I'll leave it to anyone who wants to take it.
In fact, would you be able to? I was going to say, would you be able to? Because I'm
I
sitting
can
here
kick it
trying
off.
to.
I can kick it off. It's the American with Disabilities Act. It was signed into law in 1990 by George W.H. Bush. It was landmark legislation. Sorry, I tripped up on that word. And it was basically there to end discrimination for all, right? And then in a few years later, several years later, in 2010, I think it was. Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura. President Obama recommitted to all the efforts of that 1990 signing, but also I want to say, because of the progress in technology, it was not only recommitting and reinforcing even more stuff against discrimination, but also compliance when it came to technology, which I think introduced the 508. Right? That's the compliance. So I just wanted to make sure of that. So I'll kick it off there, and it's up to you now. It's up to Laura now to really think.
It's really the Americans with Disabilities Act is really, it covers public entities, most businesses. It covers government agencies, and employment are the three major sections of the original ADA. And it makes it illegal to discriminate against someone with a disability.
And didn't Obama's signing also enforce employers a certain percentage to be hired? I think they were federal contractors. They had to hire like 7% of their workforce had to be a person with a disability.
Yes. And it's and that can be defined many ways. And that's kind of the interesting thing about disabilities. Very few, there's only one disability that actually has a legal definition, and that is blindness. And that goes back to the days of Henry Ford, when they were starting the whole driver's license thing, because your vision can be measured. And it's one of the few disabilities that the ADA actually says that it's anything that impairs one or more life functions, and it gives a list. And I don't have them in front of me.
Right.
I didn't think of it, but
they're protected classes.
Yes. The breathing, walking, breathing, eating. There's a whole list of things that if it impairs one or more of those areas, it can be considered a disability, but it has to be substantial functional limitation.
Right. And just to add on to that, I was going to say, there's also, I want to call it a celebration, in the month of October, which is National Disability Employment Awareness Month.
Yes.
And internationally, just because like I said, our company is global, December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So it's their equivalent internationally.
That's amazing. That's good to know. I actually did not know that.
Everybody's learning tonight. I like it.
White Cane Day is usually in October as well.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about canes for a second here, right? What is So canes can be in different ways, right?
Mhm.
What would be the proper process for someone with a cane? If I'm on an event and I see someone with a cane and I'm thinking about, and I don't know all the words here, so I apologize. So like there's a cane that you walk and you hold the handle, and then there's one that supports you, right? Those are two different types of
Mhm.
canes. What do I do if I see someone who's walking around who I think is struggling? Do I offer to help to see where they want to go guide wise? Do I try to identify, if I don't know what the disability is, do I just offer to help to say, hey, can I help you get to where you're going? Or do I try to identify what the disability is before I go anywhere? Like, what's the process I would need to do?
Engage with the person first. Goes back to that person first language thing. Engage with the person. Be honest. I noticed that you look like you might need some help, and offer. What can I do? What do you need? The disability, like we were kind of talking about with the person first language, doesn't really matter. What matters is what they need.
Yeah, and
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 let's
also,
go
go
ahead,
ahead, I'm
Abed.
sorry, Omar. No, I was going to say also remember that just like a person who uses a wheelchair, it's their function. That's how
Mhm.
they move. So
Yeah.
the cane is actually it's part of their bodies. I mean, they move. This is what they're using to move. So they may not necessarily be struggling at all.
Yeah.
And also remember that I've watched it at conferences. People are so not conscious of what is happening around them. If a person is sitting at the conference table and they put their cane next to them, and you're about to sit and maybe the cane's in the way, don't just move it. That's that person's mobility device. If it needs to be moved, you can speak to them, ask them, explain so that they can reposition it where they need it. Because if they're going to go, I want to say, reach out for their cane and it's not there, that's, it puts that person in a scary position.
Yes. And one of the other things I did want to, as conference staff, you may need to know is particularly someone who is completely blind or severely limited. Before you touch them, you may want to let them know,
Right.
okay, I'm going to touch you. And please, 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 if you're leaving them, always
That's
just a
about.
parting word of, okay, we're here. Is there anything else I can do? If not, I will be departing now. Because
Absolutely.
I've had it. It's happened to me. I thought the person was directly behind me, and
Wow.
I'm talking away to them, and they're gone. They disappeared just enough out of my peripheral that I thought they were still there. I'm
Right.
talking away to them, and they've walked away. And it's an embarrassing situation for the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love it because you guys both hit exactly on the nail. What I wanted to get out of that was that when you see people that have a wheelchair, a cane, any what a service dog, this is an extension of them. This isn't just a
Yes.
piece of equipment that they're using. This is an extension of what they do on a daily basis, right?
Yes.
And that's what I was trying to go with that incognito. But that's what I was trying to go with that. I did. And again, this is verbiage I learned from the pamphlet, right? Like this is to think about this as an extension of that person, not just this object that they're using to get around. This is an extension of how they get around and how they move. And that this isn't just like it's not like a phone where you just take it and put it somewhere else. This is something that they use on a daily basis. This is theirs, right? This is part of their body, like this part of their personal space. So respect it.
Exactly.
So Ed brings up something here that I was gonna bring up at a later time. So we got less than 15 minutes left, but Ed brings up something here that I bet Yumi talked about a couple times.
Okay.
So Ed Walk says, my experience running commercial swimming pools led me to learn a lot about ADA regulations regarding wheelchair ramps when they updated the law to include swimming pools. That knowledge has helped me a few times when we needed a wheelchair ramp for a presenter to get on stage. I bet you and me have dealt with this multiple times.
Right.
And I've seen way too many ramps that do not meet any of the ADA requirements. We need to do better as an industry when accessibility is part of our scope of work. This is very important because I wasn't aware of these rules. Ivette is definitely aware of these rules. And we had done shows where Ivette comes in like a storm and makes sure that the hotel is definitely aware of it because of what they represent. So I'd love you to just kind of touch on that a little bit. We don't have to say about where the property was or anything, but just
Yeah, no, absolutely.
the kind of like, hey, this is like written in stone. Like there is this process that is clear. You could have asked us, and you're definitely you agreed to this, and you didn't even attempt to make this right.
Right. So, like I said, people know what they know. Hotels in general, some are better, right, at it than others. Um, Usually there's with everything, there's loopholes also in the ADA requirements. So, um, they meet compliance when it's harder when it's an older building because my understanding under the ADA, you you don't necessarily have to make major renovations unless it's a major renovation that you're making to the building. If it's a new construction, obviously it's going to be built to the current code at the time. From that point on, you know, some hotels have equipment on site, some don't, some rent out, right? They rent from other places. We have been, but there's a point. What I wanted to make was there's a point past the compliance where you have to think about the usability of the property also. So if in our case, our stages have to be, they're going to be a little higher just because we have a pretty large conference and we want everyone to have visual sight to the stage. So that's kind of where that is, whether that be a person who is blind or whether that person can see, but that everybody has a clear visual line to the stage. So with that, we have steps. The steps have to have what I'm going to call hand railings around them so that the persons who are using any steps can actually hold on to, obviously to the sides and guide themselves up. Because it's still also dangerous to get up on stage, even for someone who is a completely able-bodied person. We also have the ramp. The ramp is for anybody who has any mobility devices and or who just needs the ramp to get up on stage also. And it has to be compliant. It is, again, handrailed and covered so that you don't topple off of the ramp, so that you're secure on that ramp. So we make sure that that's there. And the other thing are the rooms in the hotels, which I think not many people think about in conference and in a conference because they're concentrating so much on the conference room. Like I said, the platform of the stage, the steps, the ramp. We actually have sign language interpreters, cart. We're kind of gauging in that area. We forget about that. Then there are rooms in the hotels. If the hotel door is difficult to open for you as an able-bodied person, think about how that's going to feel for someone who may need help opening that door. That's one. The hotel's beds are extremely high. If you are using a wheelchair, think about if you're a person, particularly even of short stature, a person that has a tall person could have difficulty getting on some of those beds. Think about somebody now again in a wheelchair. How are they going to move from the wheelchair to the bed? And we do the inspection, just so you also get where I'm going. Before we go into a property, we actually inspect all the rooms, and we also inspect the accessible rooms to make sure that everything is suitable for our guests who are going to be on property. So for instance, we walked into a room and it was an accessible room, and the iron was sitting taller than even a taller person could possibly reach. So how does that help a person who's sitting in a wheelchair needs to iron their clothes? So it's stuff like that. You have to be conscious about what is happening. And it's sort of like if you see something, say something. I feel like I'm back in New York after 9/11. You have to kind of be conscious that if that's happening to you as a person staying in that hotel and this conference is happening, you might want to say something to management. Like you might want to, get this stuff fixed before everyone gets on property. That would be useful from that perspective. And there's a myriad of things that you can check on. And as you mentioned also, Omar, there are lifts for the for the pools, which are also ADA mandated to help persons with disabilities actually enjoy the pool. So that's kind of where that is. And Laura, I'm sure you have more to add.
I actually have a question for you, Yvette. Something I think falls completely off of the radar, even at conferences that are to disabilities. How do you handle the idea that there could be a
Excuse me.
emergency? Oh, sorry, I lost the word for a
Actually,
second.
we experienced that one year, and it was interesting. It was interesting for me because, disability regulations are different all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Globally, they're not only different by country, they're different by province. Here in the States, you do have differences within each state.
Mm-hmm.
So, that all the nuances that come with that. But we were in South Florida, and something happened. It was like something electrical that was happening because there was some construction going on, and the fire alarms went off. Now in New York City, everything shuts down. The elevator shuts down, everything shuts down. You have to take the stairs. And interestingly enough, in the state of Florida, the elevators stay on for
Oh,
persons with
interesting.
disability.
Interesting.
Caught me off guard completely. Because it was just recent that it was happening, that we were actually having the event. We had started having the event in Florida
Mm-hmm.
more regularly, because now I was going to say the company as a whole, almost everyone lives in the state. We have all retired and live in the state from other parts of the country. So it was the first time, and it was interesting for me. And what's even more fascinating is that the persons who were from out of state assisted everyone with a disability, wheelchair, etc., whatever it might be, carried them down the steps. And only those persons that were from Florida got into the elevator and went down. But we do a
Those Florida
housekeeping.
people, damn.
I gotta tell you, I'm in New York, and I was like, I gotta tell you, they caught me by surprise. But we do, just so that I can answer Laura's question, I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there. We do actually have housekeeping at the beginning. We do debrief with the hotel staff, and we kind of set the path. And obviously, if there's an emergency, if the alarms go off, this is what you are to do, right?
Yeah.
This is the procedure that we're gonna follow.
Yeah, because I know at the university level sometimes that gets missed. Students in
I
residence
think a lot of
halls.
people would miss it. Yeah, it's not something, and I used to do event planning back in my corporate career, and I'm gonna date myself ages ago. And we always did housekeeping, and
Yeah.
safety was always one of the big keys at the very beginning. And as I attended conferences throughout my life, it seems that it was kind of falling off in some places, like you mentioned.
Mhm.
So I made sure that when I started, that became part of my role under operations and under Springboard, that we kicked that back in. And particularly after, like I said, the scare that we had.
Yeah.
Even more so, I
mean,
was like, we
and
really have to pay attention to this now.
it was something that like I didn't live on campus. I was 28 by the time I went back to college.
Right.
But there were a couple situations where, yeah, I have some sight, but if I've got my cane with me and those fire alarms go off, the strobes go off, I'm at a real disadvantage.
Right. Absolutely.
Because I've got my eyes dance with nystagmus. You add a strobe light to that, and I'm completely disoriented.
Right.
So there was a conversation that had to happen with my undergrad university about, well, if she's in a building during a class and something happens, the professor needs to know that they need to make sure that she gets out.
Yep. Yep.
And it was a
that was the
conversation
big-
that had to be added. It was something that they didn't think about to add to my plan that went out to the professors.
Right. And that was, it was interesting, because I just mentioned 9/11, and that just recently passed too, the anniversary. That was a big learning curve back in corporate for a lot of persons, when 9/11 went down, right? Because I mean, I'm sure you've heard all the stories,
Underdog.
at the World Trade Center. There were persons with disabilities stuck on floors, and the firemen, trying to get them down, and they weren't sure, and sheltering them, etc. So, that really added an extra step, and maybe because I experienced that, because I lived in downtown Manhattan, and I kind of went through that whole whirlwind at that time. It definitely became a focus for all the corporations immediately right after, about how to ensure that persons with disabilities would be evacuated. and it was definitely ingrained in all of us at that time. So it's something that I definitely carry with me even further, right? A different layer of engaging with persons with disabilities. But I have to tell you, like I said, when this event happened in South Florida, everyone who was able to help and carry and move a person quickly did. And I think that was a big piece of it. It was not only the person's courtesy and consciousness, and I want to say their love and humanity, but all of it. It just all of it came out at the same time for everyone there.
Yeah.
At the event.
So I just want to jump in here. I really feel like we kind of got into our groove just now, and like the community's in the groove, we're in the groove. But we are about 60 seconds out. I have one question, which I'll leave up to the panel to figure out who wants to answer this. But Daniel had asked here a little bit ago, Daniel Skinner had asked who was responsible for providing the ramp, the hotel or the production company?
Actually, it depends, right? The hotels usually work with production companies, specific ones. They can. I think a lot of them also go out and rent. Some of the hotels own the property, the rent, the ramps, I should say. They're on property to be able to be used as part of the equipment that you're going to be, kind of like using and paying for while you're at the property doing the event. And or you talk to them. If they don't have a ramp, then you tell them go get a ramp. I mean, literally they all should have one, because that's just a compliance thing, right? You should be prepared that your event should be able to be equipped. If you're holding events at your property, you should be able to make it accessible for anyone. So that should just be standard, but it's not necessarily that it happens that way.
No, I agree.
So I don't think anybody truly has the responsibility, although they all should. Because if you're producing events, you might want to have one in your back pocket.
Of course, of course. So we run out of time tonight, but there's so many things that we missed. We could talk about, which we will if tune in. We will. But we didn't talk about the cart. We didn't talk about sign language. We didn't talk about.
There's so much more. Yeah.
And these are things that I'm sure that the AV community deals with on a daily basis, and there's more to it that we could talk about. Which and I'd love for you guys to come back and tune in next Thursday, next Wednesday, November 23rd. With us as well, and we'll bring in some more panels. I'd love to bring Ed on board if he's available. He's working tonight, but obviously he's got a lot of experience here. He's got in the comments here. He's actually got some stuff here that I thought was really interesting, which I'd love to bring to topic next week as well. Most cable ramps, like Yellow Jackets, aren't ADA compliant. However, there are special add-ons to provide the proper slope. I didn't know that, but that's great to know. Ed knew about that. It'd be a great little mix to have that. But we are out of time tonight, everybody. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your comments and everything. Laura, before I let you go, is there one thing you want to leave with the audience tonight before we go and we come back again in another week?
I think the parting words would be conscious and remember their people.
Yep. I
love it. That's short, sweet, and to the point. It's exact. I love it. Laura, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I really hope next week, the 24th, where you're also able to join us as well and continue this conversation.
Yes.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me, Omar.
I bet hold on, before you go, you got to say something too. If we get one piece of advice, what would that be? Come on, I can't let you off the hook.
I think I echo Laura. Definitely be conscious of yourself, right? And what you do and what you say, and just be human. Have love and humanity, and I think we'll be good as a society.
I love that. Love and humanity, just be human, right? It's that simple. Just be human. We're all humans. Can we all get along? I love it. I bet. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I hope you can tune in with us on the 24th as well. Your insight and everything was fantastic, and we loved it.
I appreciate it. Good night to everybody, and good night to you. Thank you so much for having me again.
Of course. So it's me as last man standing. Usually Austin would be here telling you guys some very great words of something put together. I'm not that guy. I'm sorry. What I can tell you is that we will be back November 24th is a Wednesday with with our new schedule. So every other week we're doing the AVE podcast, but this Monday coming up, we will have the AVE Tech Talks. So do tune in to this Monday. We'll be posting something soon about that. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Ed Wallach, for all the feedback in the comments. Thank you, Daniel Skinner, for that question. Really appreciated the feedback on that. Thank you for tuning in with us this morning and everything like that. From Lucy and from Kent, really appreciate you guys being here. And as always, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Yvette, for tuning in and giving us this opportunity tonight. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. Hope you guys learned a lot. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Peace out.